Either complacency or complete satisfaction.
Yeah. Or how about the L word?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going
I
with.
agree.
It's like, no, I see what you do. I see what you do. I don't wanna do that. Well, it's no walk in the park.
Right, right.
You know that.
Well, I told you it's a thankless job.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I should have thought more about what you said about serving on the boards too. Remember?
Yes.
I forgot what the way you said, not a bobblehead, because it really helps when people ask.
Yes.
You stand up here, do you really want them? Brings them on. They don't want to do it.
I hear you.
You know what I
Y'all have a good meeting tonight.
Ooh, thank you. Hey, Junior, you want to update this tonight? I'm at fight it. Last time I had a time so I'm like, I'm not doing that yet. I haven't done it.
There you go.
Hello, Pam.
Hello, how are y'all?
I have your mask on.
She probably needs it with all the smoke.
It's been bad.
I bet.
It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the meeting. Where the meeting open. Councilman John Taylor to lead us in the pledge. Stand to pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
Stands.
one nation, under all,
Under-
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would pray with me. Our most gracious Heavenly Father God, thank you for this beautiful day, this cool weather, and this community, Lord. Lord, be with us as we make decisions that affect this city, the citizens in it, our friends and family, and the future of our community, Lord. Lord, lead, guide, and direct us and allow us to do your will. In your most holy name we pray. Amen. Councilman Seaman, everybody have an opportunity to look over the minutes from the meeting of September 8th.
Move to approve the minutes.
There you go. First and second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving to general citizen comments. Right here to address the council. Not, we'll open public hearing. Oh. Yes, come on. You'll state your name and address.
Vicky Garrett, 20 North Sherman, 75092. I just wanted to, city council members and Mr. Hampton, I would just want to come forward and regarding Resolution 6654. I want to thank you for recommending a $50,000 contract and the opportunity to match an additional $30,000 for the Sherman Museum. We are asking that the contract be approved by the city council. This is the same contract you gave to us last year, and as Mr. Terrence Steele can testify, we were well on our way to matching the $20,000 option until the virus disrupted everything. Just had to shut down for a while. This year we have an outstanding staff: Dylan White, Jeff Goodman, Mr. Holcomb, who are all Grayson County natives, and Brianna Till, who is from Durant. We have submitted several grants, one of which we hope to renovate the Dr. Clyde Hall Research Room, previously the board meeting room. Our interurban panels that were given to us by the Plano Museum have been done. Our meteorite and dinosaur exhibit will be going back to Colorado and be giving Grayson County veterans and their uniforms exhibit next. Interestingly, one thing I wanted to tell you is during a search in the church government, the Grayson County metal election voting boxes were found. And I don't think I want to use them again, but we do plan to display them soon. And no, there were no unforgotten ballots. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, this time, open the public hearing. Linda, if you'll read this one.
Ordinance 6326, an ordinance of the city council of the city of Sherman, amending the code of ordinances to add a new chapter 15, fee type impact fees, establishing water, wastewater, and roadway impact fees for service, establishing procedures for refund and general administration of impact fees, providing for the establishment of accounts for impact fees, establishing an appeal procedure, providing for inclusion in the code of ordinances, providing for severability, providing a repeal clause, providing for community services taxes, notice and help to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Linda. Robert?
Okay, Mayor and Council and members of the community here to speak to this issue. I wanted to give kind of a brief, very brief update on where we've been up to this point, and then kind of jump into what's being proposed. There's been a lot of conversation over the last few weeks, particularly among staff, staff to council, council to community, staff to community. So there's a healthy amount of dialogue going on right now is what I would say. So if you allow me just a few minutes to kind of run through where we are at this point. Again, impact fees are fees that we are proposing to implement that help pay for a portion of new infrastructure. So this is a portion of infrastructure that adds capacity to our existing system. We have spent the last several months working with Kenny Horn and internal staff to assess these fees, or assess the prospect of these fees. And you'll also remember that the fees relate to three major infrastructure types of items: roadway fees, wastewater fees, and water fees. Also, as a reminder, for water and wastewater fees, the city has one service area, and it's the entire city, basically. So those fees assume that that the rate will be the same throughout the city. The study also has divided our city into 4 different segments for the roadway piece of this. You'll see this in the map up there. Zone 1 or service area 1 is kind of on the north side of town. Service area 3 is roughly east of Highway 75, north of 1417, south of 82. Zone 4 is south of the new West Travis Street and 1417 as it's east of 75, and then everything to the southern city limits. And then Zone 2 is everything that's left over, which is basically west of 75, north of West Travis Street, and south of Highway 82. The study itself that was performed takes into consideration these service areas and various other things like our land use assumptions, our capital improvement plan, and then the kind of end result, the deliverable from all this is this maximum fee that would be allowed by as a result of this study. In terms of the direction that we got from the council at the last city council meeting, I think you'll see through this presentation that we've addressed and identified each of these things in some respect, and we'll want your further direction on this. The first is to consider setting an effective date of something. You know, what was discussed at that meeting was January 1st. Staff, after we began looking at it, thought January 15th might be a better date, because that would allow the staff during the holiday time to not have to focus on that. We have, obviously, you get to the end of December and there's a lot of holiday time in there. So our staff's ability to timely review those submittals would be diminished. So right now, what you'll see in this proposal is a January 15th effective date, not a January 1st, as was discussed at the previous council meeting. Also, we had comments from the council to provide some additional rate scenarios, to provide recommendations to address the potential effects of this impact fee on infill development and on retail development, as well as the effect on local developers. So I'm going to get my glasses on so I can read the chalkboard here. That's much better. So this slide really just refreshes your memory maybe on the maximum fee. So this is as a result of the study. This fee that was calculated is based on the roadway fees, which is again broken up into 4 service areas, and then the water fee, the wastewater fee. So these numbers over here on the right are our maximum allowed by study / law that we could assess by different land use types: single family, multifamily, so mid-rise apartments, office buildings, industrial, retail strip centers, etc. So these in red are the maximums that would be allowed under this plan, and then the SA4 is just, we had to pick a service area just to compare, so we just picked service area 4. So maybe the takeaway from this slide is each service area has a maximum roadway fee. And as we said before, the water fee is the same across the city, the wastewater fee the same across the city. Now, as a result of all this, what we recommended, what we had brought to you in the past was a fee that of about $3,500, which is roughly half of what the maximum fee is. And then based on that fee, it would trickle down to these different land uses in this manner that you see there. And this is really just a recap pretty much of what we talked about last time. So as a result of the meeting that we had with the council last time that you gave us direction, and as a result of the discussion between last meeting and today with council and with developers, what is being proposed now is that the roadway fee be a flat fee across all sectors as well at $1,000, that the water fee be set at $1,000, and that the wastewater fee be set at $500 for a total single family equivalent of $2,500. So if you're kind of keeping track in your mind of the issues that were brought up last council meeting, this reduced impact to developers is what this proposal is meant to address. So it takes from $7,000, which is the maximum, down to $2,500 for a single family equivalent. Now, additional aspects of the proposal would be that to address the infill issue and not wanting to have an adverse effect on the infill issue, what's being proposed is not the $2,500 fee for infill residential development, single family, but that fee reduced by 75%. So if you do the quick math, that would mean us charging 25% of the $2,500, which equates to $625. That would be in service area 3. Nearly all of our infill development or target area is east of Highway 75. There's a little bit that straggles over on the west side, This covers substantially all of our infill development. And so what we would be proposing, or what the mayor is proposing, is a 75% reduction in those fees that address infill development. Something we did not talk about last time, but that we as a staff kicked around and then also kicked around with the mayor is for religious and nonprofit groups. We currently have other programs that give those groups a significant discount. For instance, on our stormwater fee, the $1 fee that we implemented a while back, we significantly reduced their fee, or actually exempt theirs. There are a few that are exempted by law, but this reduction by 75% would apply to 501c3 religious type organizations and for nonprofits. Now, addressing the retail reductions that were discussed as well, we went through and identified, and all of these changes, by the way, are currently reflected in the proposed ordinance that was attached to your agenda item. But basically, we're proposing a 75% reduction in what would be the other, the $2,500 equivalent fees for everything that generates sales tax, in a sense. That's not contained in just one use type. It's contained in several use types. If you look at the roadway fee table. So the intent here is to significantly reduce the impact of this fee, reduce the impact of the impact fees on the retail establishments going forward. And then also, so that hits item number 3, and then the revised effective date we've already talked about as well. One other thing that I just want to be clear on, just from a policy administrative standpoint, we do believe that just as a matter of good practices, that we should be looking at this fee annually. Whether or not you change the fee up, down, leave it the same is not the biggest concern here. It's that we review this annually as part of our work plan, which is really, to say, part of our budget process. Now, remember that every 5 years, no more than 5 years, we have to do a pretty significant review of not just the fees, but of the entire plan, the CIP plan, land use assumptions. So it's not really starting from scratch. It's really reviewing what's in place, but it's a pretty substantial review. So not only will we be doing this every 5 years as required by law, I would suggest that annually we review this as part of our work plan. No requirement to change the fees. I think it's just good policy for us to look at those annually. One other thing I wanted to clarify, or to try to clarify as we work through this, and this is based on some questions that I had with some developers here over the last couple of weeks, is just clarifying credits and offsets and netting. And netting is a term that I coined, I guess, as it relates to this. I don't think you probably find this word in the impact fee ordinance, but it is a separate sort of issue. The credit in our terms and vernacular really relates to a general credit that applies as this plan is being developed. So without getting too much in the details, our consultants did this big, massive estimate and calculation of what the total fees, the total cost of the plan would be. And then by law, you cut that thing in half. And so that's this general credit that's applied up front. So already, whatever this cost of our CIP plan for impact fees is, it's cut in half. There were additional reductions of that, as we just talked about. So, and that cutting in half equates to the $7,000 single family equivalent that we just mentioned. Offsets are the plan considering construction costs incurred by or other developer contributions towards improvements that are included as part of our CIP plan. So remember that this plan isn't a list of every single thing that can possibly happen in the city of Sherman as it relates to streets and water and sewer. It's really a kind of a finite list of projects. And so only to the extent that those projects exist, are the cost of those projects included here. So there will, with 100% certainty, be streets and water lines and sewer lines that are built within the street or within the city that are not part of our CIP plan for the impact study, and therefore did not affect the rate at all. Had all of those projects been considered, then our maximum rate would have been much higher than it currently is. So these offsets refer to projects that are already part of the CIP that was adopted by the committee and by the council. To the extent that any of those are done by the developer directly, or to the extent that the developer contributes towards those will be offsets applied against the impact fees that are otherwise be assessed. And then the netting, the third item is something that's just needs a little bit of clarification. So, and we touched on this last time. So, and there's two main categories of this, in my opinion: residential and then things that aren't residential. Residential is if you've got a house, no matter what section of town, that is existing and then gets torn down and another house built on that same site, there would be no fee for that, right? Because the infrastructure in place is already accounted for that use and that capacity being used up. Similarly, on the commercial side of things, to the extent that you would have, you can see this in the example down here, to the extent that you have an office building, for instance, existing on a lot that is torn down and replaced on the same lot, the fee, the calculation of the fee isn't based on the full, in this scenario, 15,000 square feet of new office space. It's really based on the difference between the total new space and what existed before. So if this office building, in theory, were demolished and rebuilt, then it would be the fee would be based only on 7,000 feet of increment, not on the full 15,000 feet. So I know it's a little bit confusing trying to read through the wording of this, but I thought it bared the benefit of us talking about these issues. Okay, so this slide is a comparison now that you've seen over the past of cities close by and what their actual fees that are collected. And now we're at $2,500 compared to $11,000 for Anna, $5,200 for Melissa, $6,200 for Princeton, et cetera, by these same land uses that you've seen in previous slides. For service area 3, it's different because remember, that's our infill area that we've reduced as well. So now in service area 3, the comparison is $625, not $11,000, $625, not $5,200. So the impacts of everything that we just talked about then on 2019 and 2020, based on their permits and the types of land or property use, 3.4 roughly is the max fee if we were to adopt this max fee. If you took the staff recommendation, which is roughly half, $3,500 is roughly half of the max fee, that would generate about 1.8, 1.9 million. Based on the mayor's suggestion, without any of the 75% reductions, that would knock it down to 1.4, so it'd knock about 400,000 off of that. And then with the 75% reductions, that reduces it by another 300,000. So what's being proposed tonight then is based on 2019 permits, it would be 1.1 and some change, 1.2 versus any of those other numbers. And then same concept for 2020 as well. You can see the effect of the reductions for religious and for retail and for infill housing reduced it by $100,000-ish, which is about 14% of that number. So you can see the impact that, or the effects that these reductions have had on each of those things. So now where we stand is we've got two more items. One tonight is this public hearing that we're having, and then the consideration of the adoption of the ordinance, and then also the effective date of something. Right now we have January 15th. based on the conversations that we had with the council last time. That date can be whatever you want it to be, but that does need to be set. If the ordinance is going to be adopted tonight, that does need to be set tonight so that it can become part of the language of the ordinance. And if the council so chooses to adopt this ordinance tonight, and the date is something other than January 15th, then that would need to be made as part of the motion as well. And that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. So at this time, we'll open it up to the public, public comments. So I do have a card from Jeff Parkinson. So come on up, Judge Majors.
Well, thank the council for leaving 2 hours for open hearings. Bill Majors, Mayor, Honorable Councilmember staff, I live at Fort Timber Creek. I'm here tonight to address the impact fees. I want to make sure that it's clear I'm speaking in my capacity as a member of SSCG Holdings LLC. And first I want to start off, I think, with the mayor for leadership. And Mayor Potter, thank you very much for your leadership on this issue. I think that what has been proposed this evening is much more palatable to the community. Council, I want to thank you all for listening and taking the time to hear your constituents. This is a big deal. It's a big move in Sherman, and we appreciate the courtesy. Robbie, I want to thank you and your staff, especially Rob spent at least an hour on the phone here today. I want to thank him and recognize him for helping understand some of the reasoning behind these impact fees. And I speak for a number of the developers in the audience when I tell you that we appreciate your courtesy and your consideration of this statement. I'll be very brief. I'll be on the record supporting the following. One, that the maximum residential single-family lot impact fee is $2,500. Guys, I think that's a very fair and equitable compromise. I think that is not going to upset the apple cart with the developing community, and as we discussed, we always go up. Secondly, that consideration be extended to developers for all infrastructure previously installed at the expense of the property owner or previous developers. In other words, there's not going to be double dipping on impact fees with the existing infrastructure. Again, hats off, and that's an extremely fair deal. A $625 maximum impact fee for infill development. I will tell you, I personally appreciate that. I think it's extremely important. There's a lot of momentum in East Sherman that's driven by infill development. By keeping those impact fees lower in that area, you're going to continue that momentum. It makes a big difference. You don't want to have an obviously the west side, having the full east side down the road. Good job. The only other ask, and finally, the 75% reduction in retail, restaurants, and not-for-profit side. Again, I want to recognize the council's, for understanding, acknowledgement of the uncertainty in restaurants and retail right now with COVID-19. Drive-throughs are now the norm, right? Patios are now the norm. There's a lot of uncertainty in that niche, and this discount, I think, is going to help developers make business decisions. Finally, the only ask I would make is to delay the implementation date to July 6th, 2021. Let me explain why I said that. First of all, there is no financial impact to SSCGC at all with this particular request. I think it's a business fairness issue. I realize that you're considering January 15th date, and I understand that. I would ask that the council consider extending this for the following reasons. Number one, for those developers that have purchased property that are in the early stages of development, 90 days is simply not enough time. And I will tell you that my limited experience, from the time you close a deal to the time the dirt flies, there's generally a 6 to 9 month time frame. It just takes that long. A July 6th date would mean that in order to get approval by the P&Z on the May 21st meeting, you have to have your developer agreements done. That's still your former member of the P&Z. So you understand this. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into these, a lot of planning on the engineering staff. So to get to July the 6th, and that just, that's the Monday on the calendar for council. That would be a May 21st meeting. This is not, my understanding is impact fees are not in the current budget, so it's budget neutral this year's budget. It's not going to impact your revenues. I would just say this, that developers have spent millions of dollars investing in Sherman, Texas. They made these investments with a certain plan. By giving them that added 6 months, it's a business fairness issue. It'll allow them to have some opportunity to at least complete some of their phases at the cost that they originally intended. So with that, I want to thank you for your consideration and your leadership. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Judge.
My name is Todd Young, 3103 Bandera Drive. represent Young Enterprises. We're a local real estate developer and general contractor in this area. We've been here for 45 years. We've been a long-time supporter of this community and will be as long as we're in business here. Our focus is a wide range of development applications from single-family housing to self-storage. But I'm here today to speak on behalf of the residential real estate community, whether it be a builder or a developer. It has come to our attention that this impact fee ordinance has been a point of debate over the last several months, and where and how the final outcome will fall. And we would just like to propose the same bullet points that we've seen as the mayor's proposal. The main point, one, is that the $2,500 per lot maximum would be imposed for all new residential construction developments. We feel that this is a good compromise based on moving forward. As well, we propose the same 75% discount for lots that are designated. I'd like to add, though, that we also feel there should be a major consideration for either a credit or discount on land that has existing infrastructure to its location already, but not considered an infill lot. And really, the difference is raw land versus platted lots. And the reason being is that we are already required to pay a pro rata fee to the city of Sherman with this infrastructure that already runs across it. So we feel like there's a little bit of a double fee standard there for the same persons. Finally, I agree with Judge Majors that we would like to push the effective date of this ordinance to July 6th. With the current climate of COVID and the nature of our economy, the way the start of this ordinance hopefully allows us to stabilize and be in a much stronger position. Thank you guys, thanks to council members, the mayor, and city leadership for listening to all of our feedback and allowing us the opportunity to give that feedback to those in the best position.
Excuse me, could I get you to ask your question on the pre-existing? Could you? Yeah, no, I wanted to explain what you were asking for.
So on the pro rata, currently, from my understanding and in previous applications, there is a fee for sewer and water that's charged labeled as a pro rata fee. And we feel that if you add the impact fee on top of that, it would be basically a double fee for the same purpose.
Thank you.
Robbie, can you speak to that?
Yeah, let me
Thank you.
take that real quick. So I would say, I have Clint and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there will be, it's either a pro rata fee or an impact fee. It's not both. So we wouldn't be double dipping unless we change something on the impact fee.
So the pro rata fee is for infrastructure that would not be on the CIP plan. That would be for the water sewer that's directly that you're tapping onto. That pro rata fee that is paid goes back to whoever installed it. So if the city installed it, we would collect that fee and keep it. If a different developer installed it, that fee would go back to that developer. So we did look at that, and they are kind of two unique.
Well, but I think the question is there a scenario where they could be charged both a pro rata fee and an impact fee? Because, and I would say from a policy standpoint, we probably wouldn't want to do that, because if it's an impact fee, then it's part of this list that we've come up with collectively, right? I would guess, most of the pro rata fees are not going to be things that are on this list. And so we could make sure from a policy standpoint that there is no double dipping of impact versus pro rata.
Would you see any reason for us not to do that, Clint? Do you see an expense that wouldn't be covered?
If the developer is putting in any infrastructure themselves, so if you're doing a residential development and you're extending water or sewer, that pro rata fee is already waived, part of our ordinance. So the only time that you would be charged double is if you were building on a lot that already had everything set up for you, which it really doesn't happen that often, but it could.
Not only has everything set up, but which the project is already part of this impact CIP. The issue really is, are you getting charged for the same water line twice? Is a developer or whoever being charged for the same water line twice? Once from an impact fee, once from a pro rata fee. And so I do believe we shouldn't be double dipping on both of those fees. And so that just needs to be part of our how to do this.
We could waive if it was a city pro rata, but if it was a developer pro rata.
That's right. That's right.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, I'm Jeff Parkinson, and I'm the general partner of Sherman Crossroads, which owns the 130 acre site of 1775. As you know, it's prohibited from having any residential, so we're 100% commercial. So I think that makes us maybe the largest current commercial development in the city of Sherman. And I want to also add my comments to thank the mayor and members of the city council and staff for the way you've approached this. We've had a lot of discussions with the staff, with some of you, and found you to be open-minded and receptive to input of the development community. There's about 9 to 12 of us who are active developers in the city who have had a series of meetings and discussions over this proposed ordinance. While the initial reaction was negative in opposition through discussion, we would like to now support the ordinance as it's been re-proposed, what I think Mr. Epping called the mayor's proposal, which has been articulated here tonight. I think we have support for that. Not all the development community in Sherman has been in our discussions, but major developers have been. I think as a development community, we want to be good corporate citizens. We want to do our part to pay for what we do and the impact we create in the city. Recognizing at the same time that what we're also creating are jobs and expanding the economic base of the city. So we don't want to kill the golden goose by what we do. We think your approach is reasoned and reasonable. We would like to go on record to support it. I think the concern we have in Sherman Crossroads is unique because we are 100% commercial. And unfortunately, the businesses that have been looking to come to Sherman Crossroads are the ones who have been most adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We really appreciate the staff and the council's consideration of the 75% reduction for retail. We think that's appropriate for a number of reasons. Not only does retail pay tax, property tax, but it also pays sales tax. And even beyond that, it's a major employer. Something like the New Commons is employing probably 12 to 14 people who all have a need to buy homes and invest in insurance and create an economic multiplier that I think really benefits the overall citizenry of the city. But because of the adverse impacts of COVID and what the other speakers have already addressed, we really do feel that the council in its wisdom could defer the implementation date to July 6th. That will give us and the other developers in the community time to process what's already been in motion before you go to the city. There is a lead time, and we simply don't think that January gives enough time for those things already in progress to come to fruition. And a lot of the discussions that we've had with prospective users were before we even knew that there was this on the table. So it would come as a shock to those that we suddenly had to apply for a permit to be hit by a new. So thank you again. Appreciate your consideration.
Anyone else? Now, we'll close public hearing and consider the adoption of ordinance. Council questions, comments?
We've heard several times about the land training date. The lane to July 6th is 288 days. Google says 180 days to March 20th, which is a weird day to start something new. April 1st is a Thursday. That's not a good day to start something new. April 5th, we push it out to 192 days, which is substantial, not quite all the way to the requested July 6th, but I think that would put more towards what they requested for us. So I'd like the amendment to move the effective date to at least April.
I support moving the date as well. I also want to make sure that we address the issue with I call double dipping on the pro rata fees.
Yeah.
Make sure that that's part of our policy, that's not going to happen.
That doesn't have to be baked into this ordinance, but procedurally, because this ordinance isn't about impact, it is about impact fees. It's not about pro rata fees, but I would just make that, whoever make that part of the motion, so that it's on record that you want us to look at that and make sure that there's no kind of double dipping between impact and pro rata.
I can support moving the date as well. I'm not sure exactly what date. There's not this.
I certainly agree.
Came up with, so I can support moving the date.
I certainly agree with moving the date. Yeah, we're not budgeted. This is not budgeted like the Judge said. Get it on the books, get started.
Well, I would tend to agree with that. I would pick a date. We go with the date that they suggested, give it a little more time. We go with the date that's, it's kind of one than the other to us. That's more of an impact on these guys than on us per se. April 5th is somewhat of a compromise. I had June in my head, but that doesn't follow us over for that. But I think more time to give. The COVID discussion is a valid discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think more on the commercial and the retail realm of things. Single family homes is not, what we can tell, has not been affected. My line of work has not been affected. And so I don't even know if that's a possibility that we're really muddying things up. But single family being effective on a certain date and the commercial going in on another date. I think there's some psychological reason behind the COVID-19 and the start of commercial and retail. Then we throw another fee on top of that. I think there's some effect psychologically and keeping people on the sidelines, so to speak.
I have a clarifying question for maybe some of the developers who suggested the July 6th date. Was there was that a blue sky date, or was there reasoning for that date?
It's based on the P&Z count. Throwing dates out there, you're gonna be driven by P&Z meeting, right? So what the meeting, to get to the July 6th date, Sean, what we came up with, that would mean you need to have your stuff ready on the May 21st P&Z day. So that would be when so in other words, you would have to have everything ready, the development agreement in place, everything done by May 21st. And the council would end up voting on that on just the timeline on the count. That was where they take it. So it was based on the P&Z count.
I just wasn't curious about that.
Yeah, that was
By May
ready.
31st.
Is that when the clock stops when it actually goes to council or when it passes?
Well, council would follow suit.
It's the final council.
You have 1 year, to get it approved from council.
So it's technically when the plat is filed, and for the plat to be filed, it has to be approved by council, and then before that, to go to P&Z. So what Judge Majors is alluding to is that backing up from July 5th, that May date is kind of what it takes in order to get it filed, reviewed internally to P and Z, to council, et cetera. And I would just say, just as my, I don't know, 2 cents, I'm not as concerned about the date, but the date really is a function of how far along a developer is. If all the developer has is land, they're not as far along as the guy who has site plans and is waiting in line. And there has been a delay from the standpoint of getting surveys and all that jazz. So it's really just a function of how far along a potential development is. If all you have is the land, you're further behind, so to speak, than someone who has the land, already has the civil done. And so it comes down to what you guys feel comfortable with as a council, how much lead time you are inclined to give them to meet whatever deadline it is. So I'm hearing a April 5th date, which would really back it up to February to get to P and Z. And that is October, November, December, October, November, December, January, February. That's 5 months roughly from right now. So every month that you add to that April 5th or subtract that from that April 5th gives them or takes away 1 month in their ability to get the civil work done, to get the site plans done, to get their plat to us to review and approve and all that. So
June 1st is 253 days. I would move that, let's split the difference and say June 1st.
I can be good with June.
can I just, so June 7th would be the first council meeting of June, and that might actually
Make more sense.
be significant in this. So if you're inclined to say June 1st, I would suggest that you just say June 7th, because that adds a council meeting extra.
You convinced me, Robbie. I would move it June 7th. Be the effective.
So I'd like to just say, along with my second on that, that I think this process has been a good exercise in what doesn't always happen with we're up here and we're elected officials. But I think this was the process that should have been done and that it was worked out the right way. I think probably we've had more discussion on this issue than any other single issue that, or maybe the daycare center that several years ago, maybe y'all remember that. But I just think it's good. I think this is a good time for Sherman. We've all agreed. We've all kind of made some concessions back and forth. So with that, I will second the motion.
But I'd like to make a comment before we vote and everyone clears the room. But I just want to tell you guys how much I appreciate the development world and the builders and the city staff all coming together over the last couple of weeks. Just kind of rushed, but we just appreciate that type of input. It makes our job a lot easier when you guys bring something to the table and say, hey, here's what we agreed to. And we just appreciate that type of community support and working together with city staff and council. So also as a side note, for the retailers and retail developers in the room that have those potential retailers, we still have our sales tax incentive program going on. There's a committee that meets on that, which could nearly completely offset any impact fees. And we've talked about renewing that. So for any of the retail operators.
Linda, do I need to clean up my motion or?
So the things we need in the motion are to adopt what was presented in the mayor's plan, amending the effective date to June 7th. And then also, I think we can have in the motion from a staff standpoint, to make sure that we're not double dipping on impact fees and pro rata fees.
Well, then I would like to make a motion that we approve ordinance 6326 with the mayor's plan, move the effective date to June 7th, 2021, and also include that we investigate the pro rata fee to make sure that no one is being double charged for the water.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I was just,
Wait a minute,
What do we ask Pam?
do we have any questions? I'm sorry.
Motion is approved. Thank you. everybody coming out. Appreciate the speakers and the comments, everybody that reached out to us. Thank you very much. All right, we're at the consent agenda.
Yeah.
I'll let the record clear a little bit.
And Mayor, I just want to recognize Jeff as well, who worked. Raise your hand, Jeff. You guys know him now well for his work on this, and thanks for sticking in here with Jeff.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
Yeah.
Make your presentation again.
All right. We are to the consent agenda. These items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by motion without discussion unless a council member or citizen requests a specific item be discussed and voted on separately. The consent agenda includes items D2, D5, D6, D7, and E1. Anybody like these separated?
I just have a question. I don't want it separated.
Okay.
6655, could somebody give us more information?
Yes, this is the annual resolution that we pass that sets the compensation for police and fire department. And what's included in this resolution is the direction that we received from the council during the budget workshop and during the adoption of the budget.
I move to approve the consent.
Second.
First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Carries, consent is approved. Under the E1, please.
Resolution 6650, a resolution of the city council of the city of Sherman authorizing execution of the development agreement between the city of Sherman and Round Louisville Railroad Family First LP for the construction of public facilities on 695 Highway 11, Sherman, Texas, in the city of Sherman, Texas, territorial jurisdiction. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed, notice and posted in public is required by law.
Thank you, Linda. Mike.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Actually, the developer contacted me today requesting this be tabled. Some additional costs that have come up for work in the contract that is tabled, brought back to council next meeting.
Move to table, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Okay, first and second to table this item. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion carries to table that item. All right, Linda, can you repeat?
Resolution 6652, a resolution of the city council of the city of Sherman authorizing execution of a interlocal agreement between the city of Sherman and Sherman School District to grant funding award of the Texas Department of Emergency Management Coronavirus Relief Fund. Finding the meeting at which this resolution is passed, notice and posted in public is required by law.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, Mary.
Good evening. The city was allocated $2.2 million of funds from the CARES Act through the Texas Department of Emergency Management. 75% of the city's expenses must be spent for medical and public health costs not included in the city's budget. The remainder may be spent on our COVID response measures, such as expenses to facilitate distance learning. So the school district was presented with an opportunity to receive a dollar for dollar match with the city or county's coronavirus relief funds. So this item authorizes us to share this money with the city, with the school district, in the amount of $35,000, which is the maximum we can give them, given that 25% limitation. However, we did put in there also if they have any of those expenses that qualify under the 75% requirement, we can also reimburse them for those expenses.
Mayor, I think you told us about what kind of strings are attached.
What kind of what?
Strings are attached.
The medical, the 75%, which is really determines 25%, is really direct medical supplies. So that would be things like PPE for the fire or police. It would be costs that we use to sanitize areas that are for public use. We have used it for some overtime that we don't feel is budgeted that we do, but only for public safety personnel. So anything that was budgeted for any staff time really does not go towards.
So that was just that amount of money is available to us. We're not obligated to.
There's really no way for us to spend it. It's kind of hard to spend unless you have a health department or some type of health function, or if you have a function such as a foster children situation. You know, it's very specific how the 75%, and those things are just not things we do.
Is it open-ended? I mean, or is there a date where?
December 30th. You have to have the checks written by December 30th.
And so then we're only taking what we know that we can have, given.
Right. In fact, we've already started reporting to the state our expenses. Interestingly, though, they haven't, what we report, they don't ask us to say is this 75% or this 25%. I'm not sure how all this is going to look at. No, and we have, yeah, and there's conflicting guidance between Treasury and TITA, and so we're sorting all that out.
Where do we stand on the 2.4? How much have we been able to spend?
So far, we've spent about a little less than 200,000, and we won't have a lot more. We'll have some, but you know, to get to 2.2 million with hand sanitizer at the fire department, that's tough. And that's what it feels like. So I appreciate it.
We tried.
Anybody can do it, they can.
These are the only organizations that will qualify for the mayor's. There's nothing else out there. No time is running out. It's December so no other organizations can utilize it.
We actually have given, we've allotted about a few $1,000s for the chamber. They have a project that qualified, but it was in that 25%. But as far as that 75%,
As far as
it is, and the county has their own fund, so they really don't need our funds.
And there's no organizations like TCC or somebody like that, a nonprofit or something that we can help contribute to that would.
And that would be the 25%.
Okay, it's all.
Right, and we did receive an allocation from HUD of about 215,000. We've used a lot of that for the agencies such as Boys Club to help with their COVID-related expenses. The rest we gave out is what we call economic support, such as rent payments, utility payments. We just received about 289,000 more from HUD, but they haven't told us how we can spend it. So you kind of have to wait for that to play out before you can start spending it, because you may do something this year.
One of the things I like about this particular program to work with the school district is they're able to leverage this to get TEA match for, I think is a dollar for dollar match. So they can supersize whatever grant dollars we give them to double the effect through the school district for this distance learning. So I thought that was a pretty good consideration for us to have.
Right, and so if they lift the 25% requirement, more than that's where we are.
Any questions?
I'm just glad we can help our school, because I see that firsthand, that we do have our students that need those hotspots. So it's great that we can help.
I'm going to approve that motion.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Councilman. We'll read D4 first.
Resolution 6653, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman amending the 2019-2020 budget of the City of Sherman, Texas, appropriating and allocating additional funds for the period of October 1, 2019 through September 30, 2020. Final meeting which this resolution passes notice and is open to public as required by law.
The budget is being amended for additional revenues of about 4.3 million and expenditures of about 6 million. The difference between that is about 1.7 million, largely due to some utility fund improvements that we made that weren't budgeted. If you'll recall, we have that water line at Center Street that we had to do as part of the GAT project. We also had the water line removed because of the railroad. Another project we had was running the sewer out to the Sherman High School, so that was another one that we had planned on this year, so. Well, and one had a fire truck and a few police vehicles and a equipment lease and adoption trailer, so had a lot of activity as far as that was
Okay.
concerned, and the food replacement fund. Had the grant and hangar development activity out of the airport, which was not contemplated in the 2020 budget.
I do have a question for you, Mary.
Yes.
The fire department's overtime expenditure, could that not have come out of the COVID money or?
No, well, and I say no, some of it. So what we did was, because we couldn't test, the fire department couldn't test in March, we did charge a large portion of the overtime to the TDIP grant. However, we couldn't charge all of it because it's only things you didn't budget for. So right now they're scheduled for, they have a scheduled overtime shift every 3 pay cycles, or work cycles. So hours over that, we did charge to the grant.
Okay,
So we will get some money back on the grant for that.
so this is 400,000 in expenditure for this, so we didn't anticipate that much in our budget prior to.
That's correct.
Yeah, that related to, if you guys remember our discussion at the budget workshop, we changed mid-year, or actually after this current year's budget was adopted. We changed how we keep time, basically. And because they're at FLSA, the impact of that was that there was additional overtime that was kind of built into the base. I mean, in all other worlds besides municipal government and civil service, this would just be part of the employee's base, but because of how it gets tracked, it's basically coded as overtime. So it's not overtime in the sense that they're working a lot of hours overtime. It's just how the time is tracked.
And Mary, just for clarification, these are all expenses that we voted on throughout the last year.
That's
For the
correct.
most part. Now, the incomes, is there any other time we've seen these additional revenues come in?
You know, it really varies by year. A lot of the money you see coming in and out, we have the $1.5 million that we decided to transfer out of group health this year into the other funds. So a lot of the revenue is from that, and that's pretty unusual. We have the reimbursements from G2A, which are also included in the budget. Typically, we don't see that many reimbursements from G2A, but we just had some projects that we did in-house that's how they were funded. We paid them, and then G2A paid us back from the bond funds. So
It's just kind of nice. We get to hear about the money going out. We vote on it all the time. Very seldom we hear about it coming in, so.
yeah, it is nice to have an offset, and this one was, just mainly utility project, and then just some other smaller things related to fleet that were going on the expenditure side.
Thank you.
About a 1.7.
Right, difference between the revenue and expenditure budget amendment.
More questions, discussion? To approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. All right, we're down to media questions. Media questions tonight? Sandra, let's start with you.
Well, I'm really glad that we could come to a middle ground through all these impact fees. I'm glad that we could, like Willie said, we can all work together and hear from our citizens and find out and learn new things every time we have a discussion. So I thank you. I thank the council. I thank the staff and the citizens that we can do that.
Yeah, I just appreciate it. It's just a fine example of how local government should work. We get our feedback from folks that the decisions are gonna have the biggest impact on. And we hear them out, and staff hears them, council hears them, and we make changes, proposals sometimes based on that. And we just appreciate the willingness of the construction industry in general to come to the table and have those discussions to help come to a middle ground. So we just appreciate that very much.
I want to piggyback on what he just said. I really do appreciate how and all the time that it took us to come together to understand what the city growing as it is. We're gonna be faced with some new things here. So, for those guys, we have to work together, put their numbers together, come back and get a better understanding. I think the time that it took was well worth it. And, as a council, I think we worked really hard and the staff to, reach the needs of those guys as well as what's best for the other citizens of the city. That's it.
No comments.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like
Okay.
Pam may have something as well.
Yes.
We kind of, the timing was so that, but I just wanted to say how impressed I was and how proud I was of our new park that was open last, 2 Saturdays ago. And, I just, and I tried to tell each one of those guys that were involved in that, all the way down to mowing of the grass. It looked first class. It looked like a community that I'll be proud of. So I'll just say that earlier. And we need to make sure that we do our work.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Mayor, I do. Mary for, putting the numbers together and being able to help the school district as well with, the situation that they were in. I know that's really outstanding as that we had the ability to help them out. That was really well.
Go there, Cats.
Go Cats.
Yes. All right, Pam?
Well, I just want to thank the council members and the developers who worked while I was out here in California trying to survive the smoke, to get the impact fees together, and especially the idea that they are going to try and give an incentive by lowering the impact fee to $625 in the service area 3. I hope because that the impact fee has been lowered that we can look forward to seeing new development and new homes being built in service area 3. So thank you again for that and for everyone who kept me involved and informed on what's going on. And I plan to be back in the wonderful state of Texas in just a couple of days. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, we're to the announcements. I first want to thank Sarah, Michelle, Albert, and the rest of our tourism team who put on Sherman Arts Fest this weekend. Took a tremendous amount of work to make this year's event not only fun, but safe for all those in attendance. So if you see any of our tourism team running around this week, tell them thank you. Our next copy of the mayor will be held Friday, October 2nd at the Old Iron Post. In addition to the usual networking and community announcements, we'll be hearing about the various things that are planned this year for the Halloween season. Please make plans to attend. Finally, tonight, the Sherman Chamber of Commerce's annual legislative luncheon will be held online this year at 12 noon on Friday, November 6th. Please check out Facebook for more information on sponsorships or find the list of this year's speakers. All right, so those are our announcements this evening. City Council will now hold a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Open Meetings Act and Section 551.071 to consult with the city attorney concerning pending or contemplated litigation and on a matter in which the city attorney's duty under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct in the state of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter. And in Section 551.074 to deliberate regarding personnel matters, and in Section 551.087 to deliberate regarding economic development negotiations. So at 6:05, we will go into executive session. Thank you.
Bye, all y'all.
Bye. She's like,
No.
I'm going to say this. Bye.